Okay, so thank you everyone for joining. Once again, my name is John Gondi. I'm a software developer and an IT manager at NW Light in Nairobi, Kenya. So today we are going to talk about decoupling the communication from the business layer. So in most cases, you will find developers, they have combined the communication layer with the business layer. Which becomes sometimes when the project becomes big, it's difficult to maintain that project. First and foremost, I will say two things. One, this is a very opinionated talk, so I'm going to give an opinion, which means everybody is free to dispute it because this is a forum, which means we need to have these arguments. So I'm going to give a very opinionated uh, talk regarding how to structure your project in terms of communication layer and the business logic layer. Number two, I will not be doing live coding. I know sometimes when you are doing live coding in a presentation, it becomes very hard for some people to follow. So I am going to give a talk using a presentation and code examples. So without any further ado, I will begin with the projection. Okay, so I hope everyone is able to see my screen. Is that the case?
Yes, John, we can see the screen.
Okay. So, so in this talk, we are going to talk about decoupling the communication from the business layer in Laravel. So, what is the communication layer? So, this is basically the user interface layer. This is where the layer that links the user with the system. So, the main purpose of the communication layer is to receive, uh, sorry, the main purpose, let me just highlight a few things. The main purpose of the communication layer is to receive an input and then it gives the output to the user. This layer consists of things like request classes, controller, and routes. So this is the communication layer. So what is the business logic layer or the business layer? So this is where the business specific data processing and storage happens. So we are going to look at how we can decouple these two layers in Laravel. So to begin with, I will show you a code, some code for any mostly beginner developers, which is okay. I'm not going to say this code is not okay. So this code, this is an example of code from a beginner developer. So the code looks quite good. This I'm assuming you all understand that this is a controller. Uh, so.php. So this is the post controller inside the store method. So first of all, we authorize the user to make sure that the user is able to perform the task that we want to perform, that is to create a post. Then we validate the data that was submitted by the user to make sure that the data is valid for creation. And then at the end, we create the post and then we send out maybe newsletter or we do some other things that happens after the post has been created. And once we have done that, in this case, we can fire events or whatever logic you need to add down below. Then after that, you redirect the user to the posts page. So if you look at this code, the code is good. First, we are making sure that the user is authorized to do whatever they want to do. We are making sure that the data is valid so that we don't add data that is not valid to the posts. And then we create the post. So the code is good. The code has no problems. But unfortunately, no. This code is not optimal. This code will cause some issues later on. So for some advanced developers, they may have a different approach. So they might decide to create something like this. So you have a store post request class where you are doing your authorization. You authorize the user from that place. Then you validate the data from that class. And then inside the post controller, in the store method, you just do the store for the validated data. And then you do a redirect. So in this case, this is a bit better. At least you have separated the request from the logic. This is a bit better. You are able to authorize the user at the request level. Then you are also able to validate the data. And then you are also able to create. So this code becomes problematic because when you decide to update the post, you will have to create another request, a form request file for update post request. There, you will have to validate, you will have to authorize, and then you will have to again you will have to validate the data. So let's say, for example, you decide, you know what, I will take this. You decide to take this and move it here. So let's say you move it here. And then this store post request, you just call it post request and you only do validation there. That way you will not have to rewrite a validation. You will not have to rewrite a validation method. So that works. You will not have to create another update post request class. That works and will be good. At least you are validating the data in one place. But now let's think of something like, now you have decided to get another source of data. You have decided to get the data from an Excel upload. Let's say, for example, you have people write multiple posts and then you upload them as CSV data, or even another data source. For example, an API call, you use some other data source, or even something like the console. You might decide to even use the console to provide an interface for console. So when you start doing that, you will find that you have to rewrite validation again, authorization again. Or say, for example, you want to create a post from a different place while inside your code. You say you are inside something else, a different class, for example, user class. When onboarding the user, you ask them to write the first post and you decide to create post from there. Then you will have a problem. You will have to validate the data again manually, and then you will also have to authorize again on that spot. So to curb that solution, we bring a different concept. This is where we separate the communication layer. So the communication layer has only one purpose: to bring us the user input. That's it. We don't want it to do anything else. We don't want it to validate the data. We don't want it to authorize the user. We just want to receive the data and then send a response. That's what we want to do. So to curb that, we introduce a concept: data transfer objects and actions. So data transfer objects, let's focus on data transfer objects first. So a data transfer object, it's an object that is used to move data within your code. So you can use a DTO to move data from one point to another, or from one class to another class, while retaining the structure of your data and making sure that your data does not change in transit. So an example of a DTO is this. You have post data DTO. Then in the constructor, you create two properties. That is the title and the body. So I am using PHP 8 syntax, where you just create properties directly from the constructor. So we add public read-only string title. And I want you to note, this is very important. Read-only in this case is very important because once we create that DTO, we do not want to have it changed in transit. A DTO should remain, the data that you have added there should remain there. You should not change that data under any circumstance, because that will cause data integrity issues. So it has to be a read-only property, both of them. Then inside here now, we can do some, we can create a DTO like this. So we have post DTO is equals to new post DTO. Then we add a sample post as the title, and then sample post description as the body. Then to access it, it will be very simple. You just say post DTO and you select the property of title. As you can see, the properties are public, both of them, which means you can access them from anywhere. So when you say post DTO, you access the title property, you will get sample post. That is the value of the title. And then you can create some factory methods. You can create some factory methods to, for example, and create a DTO from array, and then you transfer the whole data to array. Then by default, as you can see here, with this required properties here, by default, we have already said that the data cannot be null. So title and body cannot be null. So we already have some validation there, but that's not all. Unfortunately, that's not all we want. We want a customizable validation where you can say that, yeah, this data can be nullable. So for that case, you can write some a custom validator and even create the factory methods to create the DTO from request or from array or from any other data source. But instead of doing all that, there are some packages that does that already. So I'm going to talk about that one package here. So the package is called Validated DTO. So it was created by someone called Wendell Andriel. You will find the entire documentation for the validated DTO here. You will learn more. But basically, what you need to do is just install it, and then you can create DTOs using an artisan command, PHP artisan make DTO, post DTO. So once you run that command, you will get this DTO here. So we are using validated DTO. So you get a post DTO that extends validated DTO class. All it does is the same thing as we have done there. It creates a read. You create read-only properties, and then you have your DTO. Now to validate, you just create a method there. Here you create a method called rules, and then you add your rules. This is the same method just like in a form request class where you have your rules there, and then you add your rules in array format. You add all your rules. So now at any given time when we want to create a post DTO, we will have validation at any given moment. So remember, anywhere in your code when you decide to create a post DTO, and all you have to do is just initialize the post DTO, and then you add the title and the body, you will have both of them validated. So once you have your DTO, once you have created your DTO, you will have to validate the data there. And that's it. That's all you need for DTOs. You have a post DTO that you can use anywhere. Now, let's talk about actions. So actions, what's an action? An action is basically a class that does only one thing. So the purpose of the action is just to do one thing. You don't want it doing multiple things at the same time. You just want that to focus on one thing and do it very well. At the minimum, it only cares about one thing. So for example, to create a post, we can have a DTO here called create, we can have an action here called create post action. So in the constructor, it will receive DTO. That is the post DTO. You remember that we have just talked about the DTOs. So all that action cares about is the DTO data, the post DTO. Once you send the post DTO, again, make sure it's read only. After that, you run an execute method. You write one method called execute here. Then inside that method, you validate, you authorize the user. You make sure that the user is authorized to create the post, and then you create the post and then you can call methods to do other things. You can call other actions to do other things, or even send newsletters here. What this action cares about is creating the post. Once it has created the post and everything that is related to create the post, it's done. This cannot be used to update, it cannot be used to do anything else. So all it does is create the post and then send the data out. After that, let us put everything together now and see how they will work. So here it is. Inside our store method of the post controller, we create our DTO. So remember I was talking about those factory methods that you can create in your custom DTO. The good thing about validated DTOs by Wendera Adriel, it comes with those factory methods. So I can create a DTO from request here. You can see I create a DTO from request. When I say from request, it will just take the request and then the properties of the request will be used. So I can use some other methods like from array, and then it also has some other more features. I advise you to go and explore more on that validated DTO package. So you'll be able to see more what a lot of features that it offers. So in this case, we create our DTO from request. So we have the post DTO. Remember, this is validated because we added the validation rules there. Then we create a post. To create a post, we simply call new create post action. We pass the DTO that we have created here, and then we call the execute method. Remember, the execute method, all it does is create the post. First, it will authorize you, make sure that you are allowed to create a post, and then it will create the post and add some other it will then submit some, let's say for example, send newsletters and do all those other things, and then you return the user back to the posts. You return the user to the posts page, and that's it. That's all you need to do. You do not need to do so much. Just create the DTO, execute the data, and then redirect the user. Now, the good thing about this code is, in case you need to initialize the post data from somewhere else and you need that data validated, you do not need to write your own validation again, or even check if that package, for example, if it's an Excel import, you start using the validation methods for the Excel package. So all you want to do is get the Excel, get the data. That's it. Once you get the data, do the validation yourself. What do? You have your post DTO. Post DTO does the validation. It will make sure that the data is valid, and it has some other things. The validated DTO packages have some other things like having some, it's called default values. So for things that can be nullable, you can add some default values. So by default, if you have not provided a property and it's nullable, you can provide a default value, and it will have some more. It has some more things like making sure that each and every property can be custom to a specific type. So your data will always you will always retain data integrity. And good thing is you'll be able to reuse this data. Then in terms of testability, I didn't want to dive deeper into testability because I wanted this to be as shallow as possible. So testing it will be easy to fake DTO data. It will be very easy to fake data. And then after you have gotten your data, if you want to create a post, even if it's from somewhere else, it will be easy. You just use the create create post. Sorry, you just use the create post action, and that's it. You have your post created. Doesn't matter where it is in the code, whether it's in the store method, whether it's in some other method out there. For example, when onboarding a user, anywhere, you just create a post and then you redirect your user. That's it. So that was all about this talk. I was going to talk specifically on DTOs and actions. So there are some other applications that you can use in this. I've only used the post example because it's short, it's simple, but you can use it, of course, for anything, to create other things, to update. So when you want to update, you just create an update. Sorry, yes, to update post action. So you have an action to update the post, and it will follow the same standard. It will receive post DTO data and probably a key for the current post. And then it will update that post with the data that you have provided and such. So with this, look through, let me go back to that page. Go look through this package. Learn more about this package. It's going to help you so much. This validated DTO. This package is going to help you so much. I will share it. The documentation is very clear. Since I've finished the presentation, I can show you the documentation. Curiosity. But before I get into those, do we have any question? Before I get into showing you the documentation for the validated DTOs, we have some questions. Guys, are we still together? Were you hearing me? Ama nimekuwa nikiongea peke yangu?
Hello, John.
Yeah.
Unanisikia?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, the presentation, I think it was straightforward.
Uh-huh.
And then I was also thinking if you can provide those resources so that we can go over them at our own time. If it's something like a GitHub repository where we can review as we keep learning about it.
Yeah, sure. I will provide any necessary resources that I have talked about here. So I will also provide a link for that talks about action as a service. So it talks about actions and how to use actions in your in your project. As you can see in Laravel, they have used actions a lot, especially if you have used if you have used something like not Laravel Breeze, what do we call Jetstream. So they use actions a lot. So I will also provide resources for Jetstream. For actions. So I see we have a question from Rachel Karanja. Can they be used to send notifications like database notifications and email notifications? Yes. Once inside your let's get to that page. Just a minute. So when you are here, when you are on this page where you are creating your post, after you have created here, you'll be able to send notification from, sorry about that. So once you have created your post, down here you will be able to do all the other things you wish to do, like sending a notification. You'll be able to send it out here. So you can say, for example, notification dot send, and then you have created a notification for a new post has been created or new post created notification. So you send your notification to the users, those that have subscribed, and they will receive a notification. So you can use a notification here as long as its purpose is related to creating the post. So this action should only do all things that are related to creating the post. You should not send some other notifications here that are not related to post. But also, the best way to do what you're asking is to create an event and then dispatch that event created event. You dispatch that event, then you create multiple listeners to do multiple things that you wish to do after the post has been created. That way, you will have an asynchronous system where once the user has created the post, once this method has created the post and dispatched the event, issues of sending notifications and newsletters, they are handled somewhere else. This action remains just with the purpose of creating a post. So yeah, to answer your question here, it can be used to do notifications and you can do them as I have indicated there. But my advice to you is just use an event, just add an event of post created event. So post created event. And then once the post has been created down here, you dispatch your event there. So you dispatch the event. So you dispatch post created event and with the post data there, of course, with your post there. And then that event will be listened by multiple listeners. For example, one of them is send notification to admin. The other one send notification to, let's say, editor. The other one send newsletter to users telling them, to subscribers, telling them that a post has been created. So dispatch events here and then handle the logic of sending notifications inside your listeners. I believe that's a talk that we will have some time. We will do someday. Today, I just wanted to focus on separating the communication and the communication and the business logic layer. So, any other question?
Hi, John.
Yes.
Great presentation. This is Kevin.
Yes.
Quick question. How do you reserve the route model binding when doing update?
So, you mean the route model binding, eh?
Yeah.
So, for example, in this case, let's say you are updating your data, CDO.
Mhm.
So you can still do the same, but okay. This is also going to be another opinion I'm going to give you. I always advise you to get the ID that has been submitted, and then you fetch the data using a repository. So I'm not going to talk so much into repository architecture here or the repository system here, but I advise you get inside the controller method, you just get the data that the user submitted. Say for example, okay, here inside the post here, I advise you just get the ID and then you use repository to fetch that information. So in that case, you are using the repository system and it doesn't matter where your data is. If your data is in a database, you are using Eloquent to fetch your data, or you are using some other uh, mapping system. For example, uh, I don't have most of them often right now, but you can use different data mapping tool where you have the relational model mapping. You use something else. So relational mapping, instead of using Eloquent, you will use something else. It will be easy to switch between the data sources when you are using the repository system. So I advise you just get the ID and then you fetch the model individually. And then now you send that model inside for example, the update system. Now, if you're asking inside the validation of inside this DTO validation, inside here, validated DTOs, here, whether you are able to say, for example, if this is supposed to be unique, and then you need to ignore the one that was submitted. For example, if you are updating, you need to ignore the current one. So this implicitly provides that binding. It provides binding. You just use normal that you use this dot post, and it will ignore the post, the title for the post that you are updating. So when checking for unique, it will automatically ignore that it has that binding by default. Was that your question?
Yes, sorry. On this one, especially the binding here, how will you determine it's a post and a I mean, it's a patch or a post request, especially on rules.
No, you see, in the rules, what you do, even if you say ignore this dot post, if the post is not there, this will not be considered. In Laravel, what happens if this post is not there? For example, you are not updating, this will be ignored by Laravel. Don't forget that you are creating this DTO from request. So the request data is sent here, or the request data in that case, including the model bindings.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's simply the post DTO. This knows that this is a post data. So when you are updating, it will look into the request. When you hit this validation rule, it will look inside the request, because you are creating this request directly from. You are creating this directly from the request. It will look into the request and see the bindings, and it will see this post. If it's not there, for example, when you are creating, this rule is ignored.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Okay.
So, do you have another question?
I have a question. So I was asking, can you use the DTOs and the repositories all at once?
Yeah, it's possible to use them all at once. It will require some extra work, but you will be able to use them all at once, because at the end of the day, you are still doing some. You are still doing your. You are still at the end of the day, you are still creating a DTO. It's just a DTO you are creating. It's just a data you are creating. Only that in this case, you are creating it from the request. But now, when you are using, for example, the repository system where you are not doing model data binding, this rule will not be applied. Remember, this ignore rule will not be applied when you are not using model binding. So you'll have to extend the validation yourself. And that is also the case in case you are not using DTOs and you are using the request class, and you have not provided data binding. It will still not work. You will have to implement the ignore rule yourself. But you can use both of them. You can use the two systems together. So for big systems that at some point you might end up changing the database completely, where, for example, one day you are using MySQL and then you are asked to use a different kind of database, let's say, for example, a NoSQL database. That one does not provide the mapping. That does not work with Eloquent well. So you'll have to use another option to do the mapping. So that's why I advise for big projects, I advise you use the repository system. With the repository system, you can switch out the data source without stress. You can just simply switch out the data source, and only you have to write the implementation for the data mapping rather than changing the entire system. So when you start using models inside the inside the controller, it will be hard for you to switch to a different database. But that is only reserved for very big projects. For normal projects, small to medium level projects, you can use the model binding very well. No problem with that. Okay, so we have a question from Lewis Wambogo. Nice presentation, John. Thank you. A quick question. Do DTO still require versioning? And in documenting my APIs, should I mention DTOs for other parties who consume my API? So no, DTOs does not require versioning because it's basically the data structure. The thing is, when you are returning a DTO, if you have, remember, you don't just directly return the DTO to the user. When you are returning, you return for APIs, you return an API resource. So inside your API resource, that's where you just strip some data, and that's where you version now. You version your API resource. So for example, your initial resource, your initial API resource was returning title and body. That is for version 1. Then you decide, you know what, in version 2, I just want to return the title only. Or maybe you decide to change your DTO, you add something else. Let's say, for example, you add some data. Let's say, what's in, let's say, for example, flag. Yeah, you include a flag now object. So when someone is creating a DTO, they have to include flag. So in your version 2 of your API, that's when now you include your API resource. That's when you include Slug, but you don't have to version the DTO. So inside there, you include Slug. So you know already your DTO has this. So if someone is using version 2, they will always get Slug. If they are using version 1 of the API resource, they will never get Slug. And if you have removed the data, the same way, you update your version, you update your API resource to return the data without the included data in the DTO. And for the ones that, for example, for version 1, you update to make sure that the data of the DTO that is not included is not being called. Okay, so see, we have another question. Have I answered your question, Lewis? Okay, thank you. I see. Well understood. So, do we have another question? We still have some time. We still have like 12 minutes to go. So please, questions should come through. And also, even though I'm answering the questions, I would also appreciate some of you to contribute and answer the questions with me. It's a discussion, not a lecture. So let's hear something else. Do you have another question?
So I was asking if you have a small project where you have implemented the DTO so that you can post it on GitHub.
A public project.
Yeah, like a small project to just show the implementation.
I can definitely. What I can do, I can definitely put all this into a repository and then send out that repository to you, and you will be able to see it in action. I'll just add the UI and send it out there for you.
Yeah, I think that will be great.
Okay. So, okay, guys. So, if there is no other question, I feel it will be a good time to end the discussion, unless someone has something else they need to add on top, even if it's not a question. A comment is also welcome, or even a rebuttal. We are all learning here. So,
So I think I don't know if you'll be available next week. You can take us through a short about repository and services if it's okay with you.
okay. So, thank you for the invite. I will check and see if I will be able to prepare something by then. But I normally wish to get at least 2 weeks to prepare because I do have some other things. But the other Wednesday, apart from this Wednesday, let me give someone this Wednesday a chance to do something. But then the next Wednesday, I will be able to present to you regarding the repository system. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay. It's good.
Okay, so I see a question from Emmanuel Tagat. What do you use for presentation? Oh, it's just PowerPoint. I'm using PowerPoint. I will also send this presentation to you. You can see how I have done it. So when sharing the resources, I will share the presentation to you too. Yeah, it's just PowerPoint, nothing special.
Okay, so thank you for accepting our invitation today. We are very pleased to have you on our community. We hope we engage more later.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm also appreciative that you have given me an ear. You have listened to what I had to say. And I'm also pleased that you have invited me to do another talk. I feel so positive and I'm grateful too. Thank you very much.